Satya, Mind, Body, Spirit, Health, and Healing. This TMS talk comes from the Aubrey Marcus podcast and is a conversation between Aubrey and the Tibetan Buddhist practitioner Dr. John Churchill. In this talk, Aubrey discusses his time spent in Greece and how the ancient Greeks went about their process for healing pain and disease. Their process was to first address the psychological component, then the emotional, and then the nervous system. And last, they might use allopathic medicine, such as surgery, if absolutely necessary. This is very much like the process I would recommend for the healing of chronic pain and other mind-body illnesses. First, address the psychological, such as understanding the true nature and root cause of what you are experiencing. You can begin by looking at your belief systems and then begin to gain a better understanding of trauma. Second, you begin to feel your emotions and allow them to come to the surface, without attempting to numb them or think your way out of them. And third, you can begin the process of calming and strengthening your nervous system through a variety of different methods depending on what works best for you. These need not necessarily be done in this order. As for allopathic medicine, surgeries, drugs, radiation, I will say this. In all but extreme situations in which life-saving measures are immediately required, if a person truly addresses the psyche, the emotional body, and the nervous system, there will be little need for drugs or scalpels. Stick around for after the talk for a few thoughts on placebos.
Controlled is defined what's okay in every field, right? Mm-hmm. So in my field, psychology, right, there's a pretty conventional assumption about, well, what are the bands of psychology? It's the same thing with medicine, right? Like, well, we have alternative medicine beyond the academy, but we've been really limited as a culture in terms of access to our own mystery traditions, our own wisdom traditions.
And that's part of what got us in this conversation as well, is I was talking about time I spent in Epidaurus, mm-hmm. in Greece, which was the kind of the healing center of antiquity, of that world at the time. And their process was to treat the psyche first through a variety of different, really actually accessing placebo effect in many ways. Mm-hmm. They would, if somebody was having some particularly challenging experience, they would oftentimes, or some kind of illness that they diagnosed, they would play deeply interesting psychological tricks. Like they would take non-venomous snakes, because people believed in the healing power of snake venom. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where snake oil salesmen and all of this kind of comes in, is like they believed in the power of snake venom, and snake venom does have certain powers, most of it poisonous. However, they had this belief at the time, and it was a universal belief that was kind of part of the culture. So they would have non-venomous snakes actually bite the people, and they would tell them they had a special venom that could heal their ailment.
Right.
And so they would go through this initiatory experience of a snake biting you, which is fucking terrifying.
It was all psychosomatic.
All psychosomatic. And that was like step one. And then they would bring them to the theater, right, where they would go through catharsis, where they would actually experience the emotional gamut of what they, processing emotions that they hadn't allowed themselves to feel. Now, they didn't have the technology of shamanic breath work
mm-hmm.
and some of the things that we have to get through into catharsis, but they did it through theater.
Yeah.
And then they would go to hot, cold plunge therapy, kind of treating the nervous system,
mm-hmm.
and then darkness therapy, giving them rest.
These are the things that we're doing.
Right. And then finally, but when we say we, it's just still a small portion of we.
Yeah, it's small, but it's still a we.
It's still a we. It's still a we. And then finally, they would bring out the scalpels or bring out the whatever actual, allopathic medicines that they had and treatments that they had at the time. But that was always the progression. It was like the psyche first, then the emotional body,
right.
Then the nervous system, and then finally they would apply the treatments. And of course, empire has flipped that on its head, because you get paid primarily for the pharmaceutical or the surgical intervention first.
Right.
And so now we've actually lost this ancient wisdom and said, all of that was just bullshit. But then there's other people starting to bring that back, like Joe Dispenza, starting to work with the placebo effect, say, let's not discount this in every clinical trial. Let's actually use this.
That's right.
How about that? It's the mind healing the body.
Yeah.
Magic.
That's right. Yeah, so in the tradition that I've been trained in, which is an Indo-Tibetan Buddhist tradition, right imagination is a vital part of that. Because your brain doesn't know the difference between what you imagine to be real.
Placebo in Latin means to please. Nocebo means to harm. In other words, if you believe in something and it pleases you, it will have a healing effect. If it displeases you, it will prove harmful. The problem with placebos is the moment someone comes along and debunks your placebo, or your belief changes, whether it be a supplement, surgery, diet, or a drug, your symptoms will return. Also, if the root causes have not been addressed, your symptoms will tend to just shift around. True healing can be found within the earlier mentioned ways, leaving little need for placebos. If you found this to be meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to support and encourage future creations of this kind. Thank you. This content has been created with the sole intent of educating about, increasing awareness around, and deepening the understanding of the mind-body syndrome, and more broadly speaking, the mind-body-spirit connection. To hear this clip in its full context, please visit the original media source. And to learn more about the mind-body-spirit connection, you can visit howtosayfupolitely.com. Until next time, love your struggle and remain free.